Hi, my name is Natalie Alwish, and I'm the Executive Director of Humane Action Pennsylvania. Whether you're joining us today as a member of our Ending Canine Cruelty Coalition, part of our action team, or just a supporter, we want to welcome and thank you for taking the time to listen to this presentation. We'll be talking about how to transform your world as an advocate for animals and citizen lobbyist. So, mastering effective communication with legislators to help drive social change. Of course, we're interested in this from the perspective of an animal advocate, but the skills we're going to be talking about will really translate to any type of advocacy that you may be passionate about. So, why does advocacy matter? Many of you are likely involved in the rescue community, whether you're running a shelter or rescue, or you've rescued animals as just a passionate animal lover. And of course, rescue is so important. We need to be there for those animals that need us. Humane Action Pennsylvania is not a rescue or a shelter. We're an advocacy group. And what we're trying to do is create systemic change by getting to the root of the problem and hopefully changing policy so that one day we'll have a world where rescue might not be necessary. To truly protect animals, we really have to focus on prevention through policy. Laws can create long-term change that can reduce suffering before it happens. Many animal problems, abuse, neglect, exploitation, extinction, are often rooted in weak or absent laws. Those of you that are involved with rescues and other nonprofit organizations in the animal welfare world, you see the problems firsthand, and your voice really carries weight with lawmakers. We need you to speak up. By understanding the issues, working to educate your community and your network, and speaking up to those decision makers, you can create change at a scale that rescue work alone cannot. So, what's the bottom line? Advocacy is one of the most important tools that we have to protect animals. And you don't need to be a lawyer or a lobbyist, just someone who cares, speaks up, and also knows what you're talking about. So, what are some tools for effective advocacy and lobbying? Well, first of all, be informed. So, educate yourself on the issues that matter. For the bills that Humane Action Pennsylvania is advocating for, we will always provide you with talking points and background for the action items. But of course, also please do your own research, especially on how the issue affects your community. And those of you in the rescue world know that better than anyone. Know who your legislators are. We'll talk more about that in a few minutes, but you want to look up who represents you at both the local, state, and federal levels. What I typically do is I just save their numbers and phone numbers and email addresses right in my contacts in my phone. Also, take the time to learn about their priorities. What do they care about? A lot of times it might be animal welfare, hopefully it is, but maybe there's tangential issues that they care about, like the environment or public safety. Build relationships with their staff. A lot of times that's who you're going to be dealing with, not the legislator directly, and staffers can often be your best allies. We need to show public support, right? We need to show that it's not just one person or even one organization that cares about this issue. So you want to make your voice heard with calls, emails, and occasionally letters. Let's talk a little bit more about that. Phone calls and emails are typically what we would recommend when we're contacting legislators. Letters can take a lot of time to reach the offices. Sometimes they have to go through extra security screening, to look for anthrax and things like that. So we typically try to stay away from letters unless it's for a relationship building perspective. And I'll give you an example. Every year around the holidays, I send personalized holiday cards to my legislators, thanking them if they've supported animals in the past year, and just making sure that they remember who I am. But for direct action asks, we're always probably going to be doing calls and emails. Can you ask a friend to join you? Obviously, as I mentioned, there's strength in numbers. You can share our action alert and petitions on social media to spread awareness. If you're with an organization and you have the ability to do that through a newsletter or an email blast, that can also be really valuable. Be strategic and respectful. So we always have to be polite, even when we disagree, right? I mean, there's probably no legislator on the planet who you agree with about everything. So remember that your goal is to build a long-term relationship, not just get a one-time win. We don't always get what we want. So if we're always polite and professional, that can help ensure that we're invited back, tomorrow for the next issue. Remember to follow up. Our legislators are very busy. I know we all are. So usually one email or phone call isn't going to be enough, and we have to be persistent. That being said, of course, we want to strike a balance between being persistent and bothering them. So what I typically do is establish some kind of timeline to follow up. So if I'm speaking with them on the phone, I let the staffer know about why I'm calling. They usually just say that they'll pass the information on to the representative. And I ask, when can I expect to hear back? And they'll tell me. And so I'll make a note in my calendar to follow back up within that timeline. It really takes surprisingly little to make these issues a priority to legislators, or at least, if not a priority, to get them on their radar. So I've been told different numbers from people in power, and of course, the numbers might vary if we're talking about a federal person or a state person or a local person. But the average number that I've heard is that just 10 phone calls on the same issue. Now, that doesn't mean 10 from one person. That means getting 10 different constituents can get a legislator's attention and hopefully make it a priority. So while we'd love to have hundreds and thousands of people contacting these offices, a lot of times it doesn't take that much because most people aren't engaging in this process and aren't reaching out to their legislators. So you and a few friends, you've gotten the legislator's attention. So, what are the key components of your message? And of course, a lot of this is going to depend on what the issue is, but there are some themes that will carry throughout no matter what the call is about. So, very important, make sure to identify yourself as a constituent. My name's Natalie, and I live in, Mount Washington in Pittsburgh, for example. They want to know that you can vote for them or not vote for them. Make sure to reference the bill clearly. So a lot of times the bill will have names, but you want to make sure to include the bill number. For Humane Action Pennsylvania priority bills, we will always equip you with that. And then, of course, make sure to mention whether it's something that you're in support of or opposition. Explain very briefly what the bill does, and Humane Action Pennsylvania will provide you with talking points. Please use brevity. Remember to be brief. So I would say just 1 to 2 sentence max. If it's an email, maybe 3 sentences, but you don't want to do a data dump on them. Share your story. Again, keep it brief, but why does this issue matter to you? So, legislators remember heartfelt stories more than statistics, right? And you also don't want everyone calling and saying the same exact thing. So, try to make it personal. Again, keep it brief. Make the ask, explain why it matters, right? So if you can make it personal by sharing your story, but there might be other compelling reasons to act, which we'll talk about in a moment, especially if you can connect it to their district or their values. Remember, we talked about getting to know what's important to your legislator. Someone once said to me, your legislator is either your friend or someone else's. And that really resonated with me because, of course, we want them to be our friend. So work on building that relationship. So I subscribe to their emails. A lot of times they'll mention events and you can attend their public events. It's great to connect with these people in person so that they can put a face to your name. And try to schedule a meeting. And Humane Action Pennsylvania is happy to attend with you if you're not comfortable doing it on your own. It can be in person or virtually, right? A lot of times the offices aren't that convenient for us, maybe, especially if we're talking about a state or federal legislator. So you can meet in person or virtually to discuss your concerns. So I mentioned compelling reasons, right? So What makes a reason compelling? So Humane Action Pennsylvania will always provide strong strategic talking points that are specific to each bill. But your personal reasons matter too, and often make the biggest impact, right? Making it your story. So when sharing your message, consider reasons that resonate across values. Here's some examples. So saving taxpayer dollars, right? And of course, not every bill that we're talking about is going to be able to have this connection, but some of them certainly can. So smart policy can, reduce cost to taxpayers. Benefit or harm to the environment, animal and environmental protection very often go hand in hand, right? That lived experience that we talked about. So, what is your personal story? Maybe the bill is good for businesses and public relations. They might help local economies or align with customer values. Human health and safety. So, animal welfare laws often protect people too. So, whether it's through public health, food safety, or community well being. One of the priorities for Humane Action Pennsylvania in a past session was passing a bill to allow for companion animals to be included in protection from abuse orders for domestic violence survivors. So, that's a great example of an animal welfare bill that was also about protecting humans, right? Because as most of you listening to this probably know, a lot of times people that are in an abusive situation at the home will stay in that abusive situation if it means that they don't have to leave their pets behind. And of course, in this political climate, animal welfare issues typically have nonpartisan appeal. So highlight shared values like compassion, responsibility, fairness to find common ground, right? Legislators across the aisle, those values should resonate with them. So let's talk about some frequently asked questions. So, first of all, what legislators should you know? We all have a lot of them, right? All kinds of judges and county council people, etc. It's great to know as many as you can know, but I think the most important are going to be at the local level, your council person or borough person, and mayor if your town has one. In Pennsylvania, we have one state representative and one state senator. Other states might operate differently. And then at the federal level, we have one US representative and two federal senators. So those are the basic ones that you should know. So, how do you find out who they are? It can be very easy, for example, to confuse your state representative with your federal representative. So, there's a lot of different tools, if you just Google them, but I will show you the one that I typically recommend to people. It's called Common Cause. So, I just went to www.commoncause.org/find-your-representative. I put in just a random address in Pittsburgh just to show an example. And of course, right now all is highlighted and just doing like a very brief scroll. Like you can see there's so many people on here. So that's what I meant when I say that there's a lot of them, right? We have got all kinds of judges, et cetera. We had, the president of the United States and the vice president up top, which of course sometimes we might have actions for them, but we're probably not, like personally calling their offices. So to click on federal, right? We said that we had our one US representative and two senators. So, Pennsylvania, Dave McCormick. If you're in Pennsylvania, then everybody would have Dave McCormick as a senator. Also, John Fetterman, right? And then the US representative for the address that I pulled up is Summer Lee, right? That would be different depending on where you are. So those would be the three federal people that I would make sure to save their information in my phone. For the state level, right? Of course, again, we've got a lot of people here. The ones that we typically recommend you make sure you know who they are your state senator, right? So for the address I pulled up, that would be State Senator Jay Costa. And then state representatives. So here that's Jessica Benham. And of course, you can look at the other people. And if you're in a different state other than Pennsylvania, it might work slightly different. And then finally, local, right? We recommend mayor if you have one and council person. Of course, again, they're just like the other ones. There's a lot of other people. So, for me, in Pittsburgh, right, there's Mayor Gainey, and then city legislature, that would be my city council person or the city council person for the address that I put in. And of course, there's other sites. If you just Google, you should hopefully be able to find what you're looking for. So, should you call their local or state federal offices? So, let's talk federal for a second. So, for your Senate and your US House person, they're going to have one or more district offices, which would be in the state, maybe relatively close to you, and then their office in Washington, D.C. For your state representatives, they're going to have, if it's in Pennsylvania, an office in Harrisburg, and then again, one or maybe more offices closer to their district, or in their district, I should say. It really just depends on the legislators. So a typical rule of thumb is for your federal people to call their district office, and for your state people to call their Harrisburg office. But again, different legislators might have, different rules that make it easier to get in touch with them. So as you get used to calling these people, you'll probably just figure that out. So if you've never talked to your legislators before, you might want to try both, right? Call their Harrisburg office and their district office that's close to you. And you'll probably just get a feel for which office has staffers that are, most able to convey your message onto the legislator. But typically, I would say federal, call their district office, and state, call their office in Harrisburg. What is the general process for a bill to become law? So just, going back to just like not even civics 101, whatever before 101 is. So at the federal level, there can be bills introduced in both chambers, so the House and the Senate, and can kind of work simultaneously to pass in each chamber and then go on to the president. At the state level, it can vary. In Pennsylvania, a bill is introduced in one chamber, either the House or the Senate. It's introduced in committee. It has to pass out of that committee. Sometimes it might go to multiple. Once it passes out of committee, it'll go to the full floor of either the Senate or the House, wherever it was introduced in. Once it passes out of there, it goes to the other chamber. And then if the same language is passed out of that chamber, it will go to the governor. Are emails, letters, or phone calls more effective? Kind of touched on this before. Again, letters, like handwritten snail mail letters, would say probably avoid those unless it's like, a Christmas card type situation, like I alluded to, where you're really just doing some relationship building. Between emails and phone calls, again, I would say it probably depends on the office themselves. So, I've gotten to know my legislators over the years. So, a lot of them I have relationships with the staffers. So, it's much easier for me to just send an email right to that staffer. For the people that I don't know as much, I might not be sure exactly where to send the email to. So, maybe I'll call. So I would say oftentimes doing both is good until you build that relationship and have a better idea of who the staffers are, and who the best points of contact are. What if they ask a question that you don't know the answer to? That could certainly happen, right? We can't all be experts on every single thing. What you don't want to do is just make something up, because you don't want to be caught in some kind of lie or, look like you don't know what you're talking about. So just be honest and say, I'm not sure, but I'll find out and get back to you. In fact, sometimes I like when this happens because it gives me a built-in excuse to follow up. So I'll, come back in a week or so after I have the answer to their question, and it reminds them that we had the conversation. It gives them the answer. It gives them the answer to their question, and it keeps me, the organization, and the issue top of mind. Keep in mind, thousands of bills are introduced every session, but only a few are actually voted on. The majority of bills die in committee. Persistence is key. So, every session we typically have several priority bills, and we're very, very, very lucky if one of them passes. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for being a member of the Ending Canine Cruelty Coalition or the Action Team or just a follower of our organization. Please always feel free to email us at info@humaneactionpennsylvania.org for any questions or clarifications. If you're not part of our Ending Canine Cruelty Coalition or Action Team, please email us or check out our website to find out how to join. They're both very low commitment ways that you can make a real difference and stay up to date on what all the priority bills are for the session and find out how you can help. We also will post actions on our social media, so make sure that you're following Humane Action Pennsylvania on Facebook and Instagram. Thank you so much.